Hey, what is up everyone, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I will be showing you how you can connect your Node.js application to a MySQL database. This video, however, will have a few prerequisites, being the following. First off, I am going to expect that you understand a little bit of SQL, so I won't be going in depth in SQL in this video. You understand the basics of Node.js, of Express, and that you have both Node and MySQL software already installed on your computer, as well as Git, because we're going to be using GitHub to pull down a starter project. Okay, so let us take a look at the technologies we'll be using. So first off, obviously, MySQL and Node. So on the MySQL page, I'll put the link down in the description. We can go to downloads, and if you're on Windows like I am, you can go to MySQL community downloads over here, and then just go to MySQL installer for Windows. This will take you through a wizard. I don't think I need to explain that. There's videos on YouTube for you to go and view that. And this process will take you into installing the community server, the shell, the workbench, and I believe the router. So if you are not going to use this installer, you can just go and install each of the individual software, and all of them has their own wizards. So when you're doing the community server, you're going to be asked to create a user, or just stay with the root user and then provide a password. And yeah, so I'm not going to go through that steps. You can view another YouTube video on that. The next program we're going to need is NodeJS. So once again, just go under downloads, choose your operating system, and then follow the installation guide. I will be using Visual Studio Code to demo how we do this. I love this text editor. I think everybody about now knows about this text editor. So if you don't have this text editor, I recommend downloading it, going here. The rest, it doesn't matter. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so in this project, we will be using the package called MySQL 2. So MySQL 2 basically just allows us to use Node.js to make SQL queries to our MySQL database, basically connecting to our MySQL instance of a database, and then be able to do like all of these queries. Okay, so the reason I'm using MySQL 2 instead of the other alternative, which is also very actually more popular than this one, but you know, it really is preference. For this video, I'm gonna show you how to actually run pure SQL. This is more of an ORM, so you use like built-in functions to help you do some things easier. But as I said, I'll be using this one. It doesn't really matter. Both of them basically work in the same way. It's just instead of using plain SQL like in this one, you get to use helper functions. Okay, so with that out of the way, I have my GitHub repo open over here for this project. I'll once again leave this in the description as well. So let's go and copy this repo, clone it down. Let's go into Visual Studio Code or whatever text editor you're using, and then open up a terminal. So here I have a terminal built into Visual Studio Code, which is really nice. Once again, why I use this text editor. Okay, and in here we can say git clone, and I'm on the desktop directory as you can see here, and then paste in that link. This will just pull down the basic starter files and set up for this project we'll be doing. So what we'll be doing in this video is just making like a little demo API application where we go and fetch posts and be able to create posts. So we won't be able to do any other fancy CRUD operations, or it's really just simple just to show you how to connect. So in here we can say npm install. Just once again, Visual Studio Code opens the terminal in my folder directory, and I just installed all of the dependencies of this project. So what is the dependencies of this project? Well, we only have .env, allows us to use this env file, so we can I'll show you that as we go. And then Express, our web framework, and then NodeMon as a dev dependency just to refresh our server the whole time. And then the starter project file comes with a server file. Here I just initialize the basic Express server. So this is why I said you should be familiar with Express, because this is all basics quite here. And I'm just going to run quickly through it. So this is just using the .env package to have access to the process.env variables. Then we import Express, we initialize Express in the app variable. We use this piece of middleware to allow JSON to be parsed in our request bodies. And then here we have a route that we're going to uncomment in just a second. And here we have just a little global error handler for Node and Express apps, just to handle the errors with the next variable or the next function instead of throwing errors from everywhere. So this will catch and be our global error handler. So here we just listen on port 3000 or from the process.env port variable. Okay, so let's actually go into the env. Here you can see a few database environment variables we'll be using in just a second. If you went through the installation guides for MySQL, you probably already have an idea what these are. So host will be localhost, and I'll get to this in a sec. Okay. And then we have config. Inside of config, we have our db.js. This doesn't have any coding yet. Nothing here has coding yet, but we'll get to that. So here's where we're going to configure our database and connect. Here is the controller for posts. Here is going to be the post model, the node modules, and then our post router. Okay, so inside of our server.js, we can actually uncomment this right over here now, because this is where we are trying to connect to our routes. But if I save this and run npm run dev, this is not going to work now. It's going to crash. And the reason for this is because we actually don't have this route and this logic set up yet. So let's actually go into routes here. But before we actually do this, let's first go into MySQL Workbench or MySQL Shell, whichever way you usually create a MySQL database. I'm just going to use MySQL Workbench because it's easier than the shell, and it's you can see what I'm doing. And then we're going to create a database, and then we're going to come back in here and start connecting to that database and view things through our API and insert things through our API. So let's do that next. Okay, so going into, let me just close this up. Going into MySQL Workbench, we are greeted with this screen. Here we can connect to our local instance. I don't have any other connections in here. To our local, we can just click on that. It would ask us for the password we set during the installation or the wizard we ran through. So I'm just going to add the password in here. Okay, and here we are connected. So we can see we are greeted with this screen. We have the query window for whatever database we choose to be active. So currently I think the world one is active because it's highlighted. If I set this one to default, yeah, you can see it, that one is highlighted. Okay, so we want to create our own database. So let's go and do that. In this window, we can right click and say create a schema, which means a database. We can give it a name. Let's just call it, this is going to be something where we can create posts. So just a basic blog app, just like that, and say apply. It's going to give us this window a few times. So it just gives us whatever SQL query would actually create what we are doing in the UI right now. So just apply, finish. We can see that it succeeded. And now we can see we have a database over here. Okay, so we can actually go ahead and set this database as default. So I'm actually going to insert from here, and then I'm going to say create table. And this will take us to like this form GUI once again to add a table. We'll give it a name of posts, and then we'll add fields or columns to this table, this post table. So first one's going to be ID. It's going to be of type, leave it int. Set it to the primary key of this table. It should not be null. It should always be unique. Obviously, it's the primary key. And then we can set this auto increment to checked. Okay, the next field we need is a title. And the title varchar, let's give it of 100. Let's put it 100. It can't be null, and the rest should be left out. Okay, the next one is the body of the post. We can give this a varchar of, let's give this a text, because this is more than varchar, and then nullable checked as well. The last thing we need here is created at, well, let's say at like this, and then this would take a date, and this should also not be null. Okay, so we can delete this. So here we've created our table really quickly. I think it's actually quicker if you know SQL, so that is also why I prefer using MySQL too, because you actually learn SQL, the language, much more, and it's a really powerful language. So we can say apply, and here you can actually see the SQL. You can learn this, or if you knew this, you could have typed this out in the query window, but here we can just say finish. Okay, so now we can see under tables we have posts, and under posts we have columns, and under the columns we can see all of the columns we added: ID, title, body, created, add. Okay, great. So now we actually want to insert something into this table. So I'm going to do this in SQL, as this is going to be much quicker. So I'm going to say insert into, and then we specify the table. So I'm going to say posts, and I want to give it a values. So inside of posts we specify the columns and then the values of that column. And then in here I can say ID, title, body, and then created. Okay. And then in here we can add values. So I can say the ID is of type, I don't think we need to add that because we added it as auto increment. So the title is going to be post 1. And then the body is going to be, this is the body of post 1. And then a created add, we just provide a string date. So let's say 2021, the 5th of the 5th, just like this. And then if we actually run this by pressing Control Enter, we can see it succeeded down here, inserted one post. So now if we actually remove this, I'm just going to copy this by Control X, and then I'm going to say select everything from posts. And here we can see we actually have one post in here. So I'm going to actually go and add a few more posts in. I'm going to show you how we can do that. It's basically really easy. We just add commas to the values over here. So we can, oops, not like that. We copy this piece, and then we can add multiple comma separated like this, and this would add all of them. So I'm just going to actually change the post titles to 2, 3, and let's just maybe change up the dates a bit, 6 like this. So if you want to experiment with some queries, you don't get the same things all around. Okay, let's give this 6 of the 10th, and let's give this 12020, and then this is 5. Okay, so if we once again just press Control Enter, we should see it added all 4 rows. So I'm going to select everything, delete it now for real, and then just select everything from my post table again. Okay, so here you can see all 5 of our posts added. So once again, I hope you followed the SQL I did there. I'm not going to go into too much depth into that. Okay, but now we have a few posts in our database, and we actually have a database with tables set up here. Let's now go and connect to this inside of our Node.js application. So back in here, the first thing we can actually do is install the MySQL 2 package. We haven't done that yet. Yeah, so let's actually do that. We can say npm install MySQL 2, just like this. Okay, and once this is done, we can go into the config folder in the database or db.js file. This is where we're going to set up our connection to our database. So we can import that package we just downloaded. I'm just going to call it MySQL, and then require. And then in here we want to require the MySQL 2 package. Then I want to create a variable called pool, and I'll explain this pool in just a second. So create pool. So we get this create pool function off of the MySQL package, and this function takes in an object that contains a few things we need to connect. We need a host, we need a user, we need a database, and then we need a password. So all of these things should be familiar to you if you did the wizard, and these, if you remember, match exactly up with what we have in our environment variables. So instead of adding these values directly in here, it's usually best practice to add them in the environment variables. So I'm just showing this little piece as well. Okay, so in here we can have access to process.env.db_host. Okay, the next one is process.env.db_user. And then I'm just going to copy this part for the rest, paste it in here. And now I can say db_name and then db_password. Okay, so now we have created the pool variable, and we just want to export this pool variable so we can have access to this pool variable inside of our models that we create to actually save and work with the database. So this is how the MVC usually works. So our controllers does all of the business logic. The routes actually route to the controllers. Our views display whatever the controllers return, but the controllers actually speak or work with the models to return our data from the database. So, but in order to use ES6 async await, we can actually use the promise wrapper, and that is why I use MySQL 2 and not MySQL, because there is actually another package just called MySQL. They are made by the same people, I believe they said, but MySQL 2 gives us this nice promise wrapper, so we can say promise, and now we can use async await, and it's just much easier for me and cleaner code. Okay, so with this done, this is basically all you need to connect to your Node.js application to that SQL database. You just have to go and add the correct values here, which I'll do in just a second now. Let's actually do that. Okay, and then in here I can go, our host is going to be localhost because it's on my local computer in my local setup, and user is just going to be root. The name of the database, we gave the database a name of blog app, so we can add this blog app. And then the password, I'm just gonna blur this out, but you guys should just add your own password in there. Okay, so now that we have the password here, we can save this and actually go back. Okay, so now we are in a secure setup way. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually show you how we can use this pool to make queries and receive data. So I'm going to go out here. Let's actually do it inside of this folder. I'm going to say pool.execute. And this .execute is going to execute some SQL statement, and then we're going to provide it some function. And this function is going to have an error or some result. The SQL we can add, I'm just going to make a variable called SQL so it's just clear what is happening. This is just going to be a basic string. And in here, in the string, we can add a SQL statement, just as we did inside of Workbench. So here I'm just going to select all of the posts from posts. And I pass the SQL query here, and then this callback function gets called. Because we're using the promise down here, we don't actually need to use this callback function way of doing it, so this is nice. Okay, so in here I'm going to check if there is an error. I just want to throw the error. Else, I want to console.log the results. Okay, just like this. So let's actually try this out. I believe in order to run this file, we need to say node, and then we need to go into the config file and then run the db.json or db.js, not JSON, like this. Okay, let's see what error we get here. it threw an error, access denied. Oh, okay, I see. We have to add the environment variables in here. We only need to do this because we are not using it in our model yet. So I'm just going to add this here just to show. We're going to need to remove this afterwards though. Okay, so let's try this again. Hopefully it works. Okay, and here we can see the data being outputted. We can see post 1 and all of the data. So this is great. This is exactly what we wanted to do. It gives us in this binary row document, but it's in an array, and we can traverse it and print everything out. So I can actually take the result and say .for each, and for each result I want to console.log the result dot and whatever field there is. So let's say the title. I just want to log out the title. Okay, so I'm gonna just stop that by pressing Ctrl C. And then I'm just going to run this to show you it actually is iterable and you can print things out. Boom, we can see all of the posts titles being printed out. So we have officially made a query to our SQL database and we have done something with the data. So I'm going to actually delete this now, exit out here, and then we can continue into the routes and then build our API further from here. So let's actually do that next. Okay, so in the post routes here, we can just do the normal things we do in routes. So we can say const, and then we bring in express again. So you can say express equals require express. And then instead of initializing it inside of the app variable, we're gonna initialize inside of a router. And here we're gonna say express, and then on express we're gonna call the router constructor, and then we're gonna module dot exports, and we're gonna export that router. And we're only gonna have let's say 3 routes here. Okay, I'm gonna have router dot route, and it's gonna have a get and a post. Okay, both of them are going to route to slash, so this will in the end be the route will be slash posts slash, and this would be a get and a post route to this. Okay, and then in here we're going to be using the post controller, so we can bring that in. We can say const post controller equals require, and then navigate outside of the routes into the controllers, and then get the post controllers file. Okay, so on this post controller we're gonna export different methods. We don't have them yet, but I'm just gonna add them in here so we can speed this up a little bit. Okay, so the next route we're gonna have is the ID. So if you want to get a post by its ID, so this is also going to be a get request, and we're also going to have the post controller. So in this first get route on the slash route, we want to get the controller, so we're going to get all the posts, get all posts. The next one on the slash route, when we make a post request, we want to create new post. So this is what the functions are going to be called. And then on this one we want to get post by ID, just like this. Okay. So as I said, we don't have these functions yet, so actually let's go and create them. So we're going to save this, and then I'm going to navigate into the post controllers. So if you want to know how I did that, it's Control P, and then you just type in the file name. So I typed in post controller, and I didn't have to navigate all the way here. So nice shortcut. So first thing we do is exports, and what did I call this? Get all posts. I'm gonna copy that because it has to be named the same, and I'm gonna set that equal to an arrow function, and this arrow function is gonna get the request, response, and next. Request, response, and next, just like this. Okay, it's going to be an asynchronous function because we're going to be talking to a database. The next function we need here is the create new post. Okay, just gonna add that in here. Just gonna say request, response, and next. I'm gonna remove that semicolon. Okay. And then the next thing I want to do here is get post by ID. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Get post by ID. And I'm switching between tabs like that by pressing Control Tab, and then it gives me this drop down and I can switch between. Okay. The last one is exports dot. Okay. So I hope you're following here. Just going to create all of these controller functions. All of them are going to be async. And in here, we're going to use our model that we're going to create now. So first, I just want to respond just to see that these API endpoints are working. Res.send, res.send, and in here I want to send get all posts route, and this is going to be create new post route. Get post by ID route. Okay, so if we actually were to go and test that out now, and how do we test this out? So how do I make a post request or a get request to an API or endpoint? Well, I use a software called Postman, which you can just Google and then download. It's a very popular HTTP request client. It acts like a client. But in the meantime, we are making requests from here. So we don't actually have a client. So I'm just going to close all of this up. I'm going to create a new one. Let's maybe collapse all of this like that. Okay, so here I'm going to make a request, a get request. We can see it's a get request to localhost 3000/posts. So this should get all of the posts, but it's only going to log to the screen for us or return to us get all post routes. So we just know this all is connected. So let's just run npm run dev, see that everything's fine here. It seems to be working. We did uncomment this, so let's go here and send. We can see get all post route. Okay, so let's make a post request, because if you remember, the next one is to the same route but a post request this time, and send. And we get create new post route. Okay, and then the last one is one that includes some ID. So let's just say /1 send, and it should be a get request send, and here we can see get post by ID. Okay, so with that all done, let's quickly speed up the rest. Let's continue on to creating the model. So the model is where the main databasing is going to happen. This is where we create a model based on a post. So I'm going to use the class syntax in ES6. So we're going to say post, and this post is going to receive a constructor. And basically what this class is just going to allow us to do is create a post, and on that post we can call different database methods. So this is similar to using sequelize. I get it. People would say, well, you're reinventing the wheel. But as I said before, it's good to learn SQL as a language itself and how to implement it like this, because it can be used in very different ways. You can have much more complex queries, and I believe it's a good way of learning. So, okay, we're going to have a save function on this posts, and the save function is basically just going to save it to the database. And this will only be accessible on an instance of this class. So a class is a blueprint of an object. And the moment when we say new post, the moment we do this, it creates an instance of that object. So an instance of the blueprint. And then that instance will have that save method. So once we've created an instance, then we can create the save. But I also want different methods on the post. For example, I don't want to create a post instance. I just want to, on the post class, I want to be able to call a method, for example, find all posts. So it's called a static method, and I'm going to call it find all. And I would be able to, instead of saying const p equals new post, and then call find all like this, I would be able to just say post dot find all. So I don't have to create an instance of the class. I hope that makes sense. A little bit of object-oriented programming in here as well. So this is the thing about my videos. I like to just throw everything out as I go. Anyway, so in order to instantiate all of the fields of this class, we say this.title, because a post is going to have a title. And in the constructor, excuse me, and in the constructor, we'll get access to the title, the body of the post. So only those two things, hypothetically, for this example now. And then the body, and then we can set that equals to body. Okay, so these are the only two things we're going to receive from our constructor in order to create the fields on this object. So once we create something or save it to the database, this is where we're going to be using, okay, actually in all of these, this is where we're going to be using the database connection pool. So if we go back here, this file over here, this is where we're going to be using this pool to make different requests to our database. Okay, so let's bring in that pool. So you can say const db, I'm going to call it, and require, and then I'm going to navigate into config db. So I want to create a post here. So this is what the save does. So once I do this, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to create the created at date as follow. I'm going to say let d equals new date, datetime object, and then I want the year, the current year. So I'm going to just name it as this. I know it's not the best variable names. I'm going to get the full year. Then I want the month, and I'm going to get month. And I want to add 1 to the month because the month in JavaScript is 0 index. So if it's, for example, December, which is the 12th month, it would return 11. So we just want to add 1 to that. Okay, then we want to get the days and get days, get date, excuse me. This would return the actual day number in the month, not in the week. So now we can construct our let created at date equals the following template literal. And this is how we construct date in this form. Well, this is how I do it. So, okay. And now we can add this to our SQL query. So we want to actually add this. So we once again going to say SQL. And here I'm going to use template literals because this is going to be a big query. And I'm going to say insert into posts. I want to insert into the title field and the body field. And then the created underscore at field. So these names should correspond to the column names in our database. For here we had ID, title, body, and created at. It should be named exactly the same. Okay, and we want to give it the values of the following. And template literals, once again, it's so nice using it like this. I find it very nice. Okay, just like this. Now we can add this dot, and then we add the title of that object. So once we call save on that object, it's going to accept that we have already initialized it in the constructor. Well, we won't be able to do it otherwise because the constructor is looking for those two parameters. So we can say this dot body, and here we can say this dot, or you don't have to say this. We're going to use this created at date. We constructed here. And one thing that is important to note when doing it like this, when working with the SQL syntax, we should still add semi quotations like this around any strings. And date is also formatted in this way. That is why I'm doing it like this for SQL. So here we created our SQL statement we want to happen, and we fill in our values dynamically. Okay, so we're going to insert a new post. And in order to do that, we're going to say const save, or let's call it new post, is equal to await. We can use the await syntax because of this promise pool over here. So we can say await, and this is an async function. So we can say await db.execute, and we pass it in that SQL statement. And then it would return an array. If you can see here, it's going to return a row packet data as well as field packets. So previously, when we used the callback function and we asked for the result, it gave us this row packet data packet, and then we didn't ask for this, but now we get those two. So I'm just going to destructure it in an array like this, and instead of using the second value, I'm just going to add an underscore like that, so it's just taking its place. And then at the end, I want to return this SQL statement to our users like this. So we're just going to say new post. So this will return the new post that is created at the end. So let's actually see this in action now. So if I were to save this and we create an instance of this post, we haven't exported yet. So let's export this post. Module.export is equal to the post object. Oops, not JSX. Okay. Now we can actually use this post inside of our controller. So let's actually try and create a post. So instead of doing this part over here, I'm still going to return that. But at the top, I actually want to import our post model required inside of the models folder, post. And here I'm going to say const post equals new post. And we pass it in a title. If we can see, it asks for a title and a body. So we can say first post, body of first post. Okay, just like that. On this object, we can now call save, the method. So now I want to console.log whatever this save returns. So this is going to return. Let's actually make this a let, so we can reuse that variable. So we can set post equal to that, and then just console.log out post. So let's actually try and run this. I'm not sure if this is going to work, if we did everything correctly. Let's see. Okay, so once again, we're going to create one. So it's going to be a post request to only/post. Then we're going to go into the body tab, the raw, drop down JSON. And here we're going to add the title of okay, so I actually forgot to do this part. Instead of adding the hard-coded data like this, I'm going to actually get it from Postman. I'm going to extract that from the request.body. And the reason we get access to that body is because of this piece of middleware over here. Okay, so I'm going to extract the title and the body. And I'm going to add those two as the object's fields or parameters. Okay, so let's actually go to Postman and try this out now. I'm gonna give it first post from Postman, and I'm gonna give it a body of this is the body from Postman, and I'm gonna send this, and let's see what we get back in the console. We get unawaited promise, so we have to await the post.save because the save method is an async function. It returns a promise, so we actually return a promise here and we have to await that promise. So let's actually save this and try again. Okay, let's just say #2 or something, send, and then we go back. And here we can see something is returned. Results set header, fields count, and then we can see inserted ID is 12, info, affected rows. So it did enter something into the database. Okay, so let's actually go and view that in Workbench. And we can run this. And here we can see a few things being returned. Here we can see our Postman being logged. You can see I tried it a few times here with something else, but here we entered the first one, went through, and here's the second one. So we can see we're actually adding things now from our save method. So the next thing I want to get done here is quickly finish the find all. and then the find by ID. So these are both going to be static fields, as I explained previously. Find by ID, and we're gonna receive some ID as parameter. So the find all is going to have a SQL statement that's going to say select, and we're gonna say everything, so all the columns from the posts. And then we just want to execute this. So we want to return db.execute, and then we want to execute the SQL statement. Here, I'm not going to await this function. I'm not going to make this a asynchronous function, because I'm just going to return the promise and let it be handled from there. I can actually do it here as well, because I'm awaiting it on the other side. So I can actually remove that await in this async, and then let's see if that actually works. I'm quite curious, but that is what my logic of this is telling me. But this should work. And then the find by ID, so we're going to have a SQL statement. I'm going to use backtick, so we want to select everything from posts, and then we use the where clause, where the ID is equal to whatever the ID is that is passed in. And remember, the ID is a string, so int, so we can just leave it like this. This is how you represent ints. Okay, and then we can close that off. Then we can say return, once again, just return the promise. So we can say execute SQL statement and then return that promise. Okay, so we can basically just return this, if I have this correct. I hope so, otherwise I'm gonna have to do this part over again. Okay, so let's quickly try this. I want to find all, so in the controller, let's close the create, get all posts. We want to do the following. We want to say try catch, and we want to say posts is equal to await post.find all. Okay, and then we want to res.status, want to return a 200, and then the JSON of the posts, just like that. If there's an error, we want to console.log that error, and then we would just want to return it to our global error handler in the next function. Okay, so we should actually be doing this in a try catch as well. So I'm just gonna cut this and say try catch, paste that back in there, and instead of doing this part here, I'm just gonna say res.status 201 for created, and return the newly created post. I'm just gonna return a message, because this is just an example. This is not exactly set up. This function is not exactly set up the way I would like it to be. I would use UUID and then create it there and send the actual post back. But I'm just gonna say post created, like that. And then if there's an error, we want to do the same thing. Paste that in here. And then the last one, try catch, let post equals post.find by ID. Okay, and this is going to be awaited as well. And then the ID of, let's say, go to Workbench and let's check this out. We want to get the ID of 12, which is the hashtag 2. The ID of 12, and here we can res.status of 200, and then return JSON, where we return that actual post that we found. Okay, so in here, this is where we actually use that syntax that I showed previously. So we can use that syntax over here, because it's going to return the field data as well as the actual row data. Okay, and we want the row data, so we do it like that. Okay, I think this should work. Let's go try it out. Let's go into Postman. Let's create a new post, or let's find a post by an ID. So we get post, say localhost 3000/post, and we get a post by ID 12. I actually shouldn't hardcode this in here. This is very bad. I should get this from the params, the request params. So I can say let post ID equals request.params.id. And if you're wondering where I get this request params.id, this is allowed when in my route I specify the /id. So now if I want to get that value, I gave it a variable of id, and here I can extract it under the request params. So instead I add the post id, which is more dynamic. And if there's an error, we just want to console log that error out there again. Okay, let's try this and send, and we get back something went really wrong, which is really bad. So let's go and check what happened. Okay, you have an error in your SQL. Okay, so it looks like I have a error over here. In my where statement, I never added a equals to find by ID. So let's try that again, save, and let's return, send, and there we get back our post. We get it in the format of an array, so we can actually just extract the first value out of the array. So in the post, when we get the post over here, say post, and then get the 0th index like this, and save. Let's try that again. Get that post and send. Then we get that post exactly as an object, which we can now do a lot of things with. So now you can see how we do that. And then the last one we need to check out here is the create new post. So okay, we've already checked the create new post. We want to get all the posts, so check if this one works. So that's going to fire off this find all over here. So let's try that. Just like this, and here we can see all of our posts. Once again, it's an array inside of an array, and the reason for this is you can see it returns the field data, which we don't want. So let's actually go and change that. Inside of our post controller, get all data. Instead of the post just like this, we're gonna just add the array destructuring and then pull out the first array, not the second one, and it's still going to return it inside of an array, but that's okay because we want posts as an array because we can loop through it and do things. So let's try that again and send. Now we get the JSON back, the posts inside of an array, and you can see all of them like that. And the nice thing, we can add a little count, so we can say count is equal to post.length because it's an iterable, so we can run this method on it and save. And now we should get back the count. So we can see a count of 10. We have a total of 10 posts in here. So yeah, this is how the entire project is going to go. I'm not going to go any further into this. I really hope this project helped you out. I would definitely suggest go reading the documentation and playing around with this because it's really nice. I'm currently at university, and this is kind of the stuff they teach you. They teach you to use this. You kind of see it as old technologies, but it's still rather useful in a sense if you learn it in this fashion. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more content just like this, and before I leave, I just want to say thank you very much for 5,000 subscribers. It really shocked me that it came so fast. I didn't expect that at all. And just once again, thank you to all of you guys. And once my exams are over, I would definitely be spending more time figuring out a better YouTube schedule, as I haven't been very consistent lately. So with that out of the way, see you guys in the next one. Cheers.